Hello everybody, this is Greg Cooper from Front of Mind Coaching. I'm a LinkedIn specialist based in Bristol, UK, and today we're going to be discussing social selling. I've got two very authoritative social selling experts with me today, and we're going to be looking at what is social selling, why is social selling important, and how to get started on social selling. And we'll also have time to look at some of your questions. We're going to run for about 45 minutes today. I've got some questions I want to put to my two guests, and then we're going to put as many questions in as possible from you who are watching in the audience live. So just to introduce you then to the two guests that I have today, we have Biehn Tillman, who is the CEO and founder of Social Sales Link. Biehn and her team help organizations to leverage LinkedIn for business development purposes, as well as working with organizations directly. Biehn delivers social selling training globally through a network of sales trainers. And also, incidentally, before I forget, Biehn has written the book on social selling, and it's this one here.
Yay!
So please, go out and buy it. Fantastic workbook on social selling. I really recommend it. Good morning, Biehn. How are you today?
I am well. Thank you for having me, Greg. This is so much fun.
Great. Thank you. So, my second guest is Sander Biehn. Sander is in Atlanta, and Sander is CEO and founder of a company called Thought Horizon. Thought Horizon are an organization that works with sales and marketing teams to align those two disciplines in their activities using something which Sander talks about as micro-content marketing, which I think he's trademarked that phrase. I'm sure he'll explain it later on. Sander has a fantastic background in social selling. He comes from a high-ticket sales background, so he has got guaranteed credibility with any salespeople who are skeptical about social selling. So welcome, Sander.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here with you and Biehn.
Yeah, thank you. Right, I'm really excited to have these two guests with me today because I think they've got some fantastic insights into the art and science of social selling. So I'm going to start with a few questions, and we had a few technical glitches just before the program began, and I've lost some of my apps actually, which means it's more difficult for me to see some of the comments that are coming up. But I will be trying to pick up as many questions and comments as I can. First question I wanted to ask you guys was, what was your epiphany moment on social selling? When did you actually realize that, hey, yeah, social selling is big. Social selling is going to be massive. Biehn, what was your moment?
So I don't know when my moment was this is going to be massive, but my epiphany moment was probably the first week that I saw LinkedIn, and I was a latecomer, 2008, and I was introduced to this like it was a job-seeking tool in some ways, and I'm looking through this and I realize I have the ability to search and filter my connections, and that was this huge aha moment of this is a sales tool. When I started in sales back in 1990, in 92, I had an experience where I was sitting across from one of my clients staring at this overflowing Rolodex, thinking if I could get my hands on his address book for 15, 20 minutes, I could figure out who he knew and ask for introductions. I'd never have to make another cold call. But in 1990, you couldn't say, hey, Mr. Client, can I thumb through your business cards, right? Like, that wasn't exactly appropriate. That's when I saw that, I had this moment in 2008, and I said, this is unbelievable. And so that's when, as a sales trainer, I started teaching LinkedIn, and now that's all I do.
Yeah, I mean, for me, business has always been about networks, and the genius of LinkedIn is it now makes those networks visible.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, Sander, what was your moment, your epiphany with LinkedIn and social selling?
Yeah, so like Biehn, I mean, I saw the power of some of these tools, but for me, it was much more of a first-hand kind of experience because, up to just a couple years ago, I was actually working as a salesperson. I worked at AT&T, and I had an enormous customer here in Atlanta who we were trying to sell to. And I was trying to figure out how to get in front of them. These were not people who were open to my conversations, and as most people know, anyone who's in sales or has tried sales is on the line here. It's very difficult these days to get a hold of people via their email or via voicemail. And I was trying to crack the nut of figuring out, like, hey, how do I influence these people? How do I get my ideas in front of them? How do I get them to start thinking about my company, at the time AT&T, as a thought leader in the areas the things that I wanted to sell to them? And I started blogging. I started using social media in the form of LinkedIn and Twitter mainly. And the epiphany moment came for me in this regard. We started getting RFPs from the customer, and inside those RFPs, there were questions that were directly related to things that I had blogged about. So things that I had actually talked about as future state for the solutions that we had, that only we sort of had. I started seeing those crop up in the questions that were in these RFPs. And it kind of sent that little tingle down the back of your neck. You're thinking, man, there's something to this. There's some sort of influence that's happening here. And especially since we all will say and know, those of us in the business, that 80% of the posts that people read, they're not going to comment on, they're not going to say anything about it, but they will internalize those things. So, as much as it might have seemed like a thankless idea, like when I started seeing those notions come up inside the RFPs, I was like, wait a minute, this is really something, and it really works. And, the kind of the letdown to all this is we ended up closing about $47 million worth of new total contract value, new deals with the customer at AT&T. And there was no question in my mind that that was because of what was happening inside of social media.
And from my recollection, Sandra, that account was pretty dead, wasn't it? The one that you mentioned when you started.
Right. As a matter of fact, that's why I moved to Atlanta, because they needed somebody to take on the account. They had just fired the person who was in the job before me, and they said, okay, here, have at it. Let's see what you can do. And I want to tell you that I didn't come at this completely cold. I had been thinking about this for a number of years. Basically what Biehn was saying, that times had changed. Social media was out there. And the Rolodex was going away, but the new Rolodex and a way to find information was there. And so, I think that in many ways our stories are similar.
We were talking a few moments ago about, Biehn raised the difference between social selling and social media, and perhaps people aren't really clear about that. So perhaps we could just briefly explain and clarify what's the difference between social selling and social media, and how the new social selling model is different from the traditional sales model. Biehn?
So a lot of questions. We'll start with, so the difference I see between social media and social selling. So social media really is primarily a marketing tool when it comes, or a marketing function when it comes to businesses. So social media, personally, if you're on Facebook, you're doing all the things, but from a company perspective, typically marketing owns social media. They're putting out good content, they're engaging when they can, they're the front and face in social. Social selling is individualized. Whether people want to believe that or not, social selling is about the person, not the company, number one. And number two, you have to, as a salesperson, own social selling. It's nothing that you can outsource or have someone run for you or have a department run for you. Social selling is really four things, and it starts with listening. And I know that sounds very cliche, but it's really identifying what are your clients and prospects talking about, what are they liking, what are they sharing, what are they engaging with on Twitter and LinkedIn, and even in the blog sphere. Like, what is the stuff that they care about? The second piece is educating and offering insights. So that's the content piece that really, although marketing can help support it, it's got to come from the sales perspective. So it's offering content and education and insights that gets people thinking, that gets them kind of going, I should look at that inside my own business, or that brings up a point I haven't thought about before. And that's really going to come from the field. That's going to come from the people that are talking with the clients every single day, that are out there understanding in the moment the switches and changes in industry. And so those education and insightful moments really need to come, at least form, beginning at the sales reps level, because they're really the ones that are handling that. Education insights is not only having your own blog or your own content, it's offering other relevant pieces with your spin or with your view on the piece that you shared, and it's engaging on other people's blog posts as well, and engaging with the people that commented on blog posts. So it goes, and education, in my opinion, really begins with the LinkedIn profile as well. So if that's your primary tool that you're using for social selling, you need to make a little switch from resume to resource, and your LinkedIn should be a resource that's offering aha moments when people get there that get them to want to have a phone call with you. Because at the end of the day, if you're in sales, that's what you want, more phone calls with the right people. That's the first two. The third is really prospecting, and that's leveraging your network. As I started to talk about that Rolodex, it's about identifying particular companies that you want to go get into and figuring out who you know that can help you do that. And the fourth is taking it offline, and that's really positioning yourself in conversation based on what you learned, the intelligence that you've gathered, the data that you've discovered during your listening phase, and creating a conversation that positions you as the subject matter expert.
Wow, that's really a wealth of information and insight that you've shared there. Thank you. And it's really interesting, isn't it, that simple sort of change of perspective that this is not marketing, this is not marketing led, this is individual salesperson led. Sander, what would you like to add?
Yeah, I would just add to that, and I think Bryn said it really well, but just to distill it, it's basically taking social media and applying it into all the different areas that we think about inside of sales, such as, prospecting, that cold calling aspect, and then engaging with clients through what they call the buyer's journey, being with them along the way, making sure that what you're engaging with them on hits the different phases of the sale, from them thinking about the product to trying to get more information about it, to who else is using it, to finally okay, I'll take it, and then also just down the road as well, being able to stay in touch with them and doing the upsell down the road. So from my perspective, and what we talk to a lot of sales forces about when we work with them is that really this is just integrating social media into what they're already doing. And I like to tell people that it's not even a matter of hey, you need to move away from what you're doing now and do more of this. And the question often comes down to, how much time do I need to spend doing social media? And the answers are very, very, in my opinion, user specific. It depends what you're doing that day. If you're sitting there cold calling, maybe spending half of that time doing it through social media might be a better avenue than doing it by phone, maybe 100% of the time. These are questions you have to ask yourself when you're doing this. But really, from my point of view, this is all about making money. It's not about making impressions. And so, I think that it really comes down to the salesperson intelligently using these tools to get it done. And the area I'd love to talk more about is what role does marketing play in that? Because they play a huge role in creating the content that is either usable or completely not usable for sales. And believe me, as someone who's been in a career in sales, most of the material that I saw, whether it was brochures, to blog posts, was not usable for me as a salesperson. And that's an area that I think absolutely needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
So let's pick up on that point a bit then, Sander. So what does a salesperson really need from marketing? How can marketing serve their salespeople best in this respect?
Yeah, and so you knew you were going to hear about it sooner or later. From my perspective, something that I talk about is micro content. And we talk about content marketing, and the way marketing organizations have always been arranged at from the distant past is around impressions. And so if you're trying to get the most impressions, you need to put the broadest message into the marketplace because that will appeal on some level to almost everyone. So if you say, hey, we've got the fastest, at AT&T, when I worked there, we had the fastest network, for example. Well, everyone's going to want to hear about that, whether you're in the healthcare vertical or whether you're in the energy industry. So, but from my perspective, that kind of content is lost. It doesn't really help salespeople move the ball forward at all. Really, I think what's much more usable and is actually possible because of social media is to create very specific content. So content that talks about how the solutions of your company benefit a particular vertical, such as how does what your company offers help out the energy industry? How does it help out the healthcare industry? And you need to talk about that very specifically. And I believe that you do need to create a lot of content to do that. And in the end of the day, you're going to get far fewer impressions. But I think we're talking about social selling here. You're going to have more sales, and that's our hurdle: is to prove to customers and to companies. This is what Brent and I do. That there is that ROI, and it's in the form of dollars and cents.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do you think are the barriers that need to be overcome for companies to start to realize some of the benefits? What is it that stops companies actually from engaging with the social selling approach?
If that question is for me, I'll briefly say that in my opinion, a lot of this comes down to marketing, because marketing owns a lot of budget around these types of things, and without marketing, you're not going to get the content. Without the content, you're not going to get the salespeople to do what they need to do or give them the tools to do what they need to do. So the way marketing operates, in my opinion, is that they're very much quant-driven. They want to see impressions. They want to see numbers. But I think we need to turn their attention away from impressions and let them understand that, hey, this is a closer relationship with sales, and so this has to be driven through dollars. And in my opinion, the big hurdle that we have is to try to connect CRM data with what people are doing inside of social. And it's really the holy grail here, because it will either prove what we're doing, or if we're unable to prove that, this industry will, I don't think, catch on in a way, because it will not be funded by marketing.
Brilliant. Do you want to add something? Roll the marketing there?
I want to just jump on Sanders' comments, because I 100% agree with him. There are a few dashboards out there like People Links and R Factor that actually do bridge the gap between social activities and CRM. And I think that's a growing world. I know that they're connected, particularly I know People Links is connected to Salesforce, and so the activity that they're doing inside of the social dashboard and when it's inside of the CRM, they are talking to each other. So I do see some movement in the industry of starting to adapt that. Right now, the KPIs are all around content and engagement. Very little is around the warm market, the introduction requests, and the referrals that are coming through. And I think that this is still in its infancy. And I think as that starts to grow, we're really going to see a lot bigger bridge. The interesting thing, as Sander mentioned, is marketing owns the dollars that pay for these programs because we're considered social, and so it always goes back to them. And as Sandra could probably tell you better than I, there's often this, it's kind of like that magnet effect where they just can't, here's marketing and here's sales, and they start, they just can never quite, it's like a constant battle where they're just not aligning typically. And so I think one of the things that has to happen is first they have to look at what are the marketing goals, and what are the sales goals, and what does sales need from marketing to hit those goals? marketing tends to create beautiful content about products and services, not necessarily solutions. Where sales typically wants just solutions. Give me solutions. I don't care how pretty it is. My clients don't care how pretty it is. I just need stuff that's going to get them engaged and want to have a conversation. And so I'm just kind of, in a sense, reiterating some of what Sandra said, but there needs to be, the first thing that has to happen is there needs to be alignment before there's going to be buy-in. And the buy-in has to start at the top. I mean, everything is going to be kind of thrown up, upside down. KPIs have to change. What people are being measured on can't be on how many phone calls did you make, and so still in some of those big companies, and even there's so many companies moving to inside sales teams, and I feel like they're kind of falling back on how many demos did you give versus, right, and versus, how many opportunities of people that are really solidly in the pipeline, which matters much more than how many people did you talk to, is how many people did you talk to that care, And that comes out of social. I had an experience, just quickly, and then I had an experience with everyone knows them, it's a very large social selling type company, and I requested a demo on the site because I am often bringing tools into my clients. And when I got to the demo, the rep was really mad because I was not a big enough company for him. Had he done his research and found out that I work with these companies, I'm constantly blogging about tools, he would have seen I could have been a great referral source, but instead he felt like I was wasting his time. And I said to him, if you had spent 5 minutes looking at this one phone call could lead to 20 pieces of business versus your small-mindedness of, you're not my prospect, get off my line. And at the end he got that. But even the big social selling companies that are like selling social selling tools are really barely using social selling to make a sale better or to make the rapport building better. So I kind of got off track there, but
we're talking about a culture change, really, aren't we here?
It's a culture change, right?
I spent 25 years running a marketing company that would work with the big software companies. And for some of the quite a lot of our work was selling into existing or marketing into existing accounts. But what we were asked to market into those accounts was what was convenient and what worked for the marketing people and the client, not what worked for the customer. And it was all driven by meeting these quarterly sales targets.
Yeah, I would like to add to this that I think that one interesting thing that sort of bumping up against all this is the rate at which technology is changing. I work with a lot of technology firms, and what I see is CEOs are saying like, man, we're known for this, but we really need to be known. We need to get known for this because this is the direction that the company is going. And then the first thing they do is throw the sales team under the bus because they're not equipped. And these people are not the right people, to go and sell this message. And so you have your sales vice president du jour, and that's a revolving door, and nothing ever seems to get solved. And I think that if we start to consider that the world is moving at a much faster pace from a technology perspective, social media really serves that kind of a world. The kind of world where you're saying, like, this year our company is about selling product X, but next year we're moving into technology Y. So, I think that there's going to be a necessity that comes around this, Greg, and I think that, eventually we're going to see people saying, man, this makes so much sense, and it's just another reason to do this. But at the moment, we're still tied up with, especially with the, you look at the big Fortune companies, what is our campaign, and a campaign to me, I always, I'm a classical studies major. I always think about like Caesar marching through Gaul, with hundreds of thousands of people, no communication, and they're just going to do something. For all they know, the empire is falling apart, but they're just out there, marching forward, doing what they were told to do 2 years ago. So I just think that, it's an acknowledgement of the information age that we start using social media and using it to pivot quickly. To target the correct customers with the message that is the most relevant today. Because, and I'll end by saying that, you know, there are so many startups out there ready to eat your lunch if you're SAP. I mean, of course, SAP are these big companies that are looking to buy those kind of companies as well. But, you know, they can take a bite out of profits and make a difference with shareholders. So, you know, it's just there needs to be a bigger realization of what's going on here in order to make that pivot.
This would be a good point, perhaps, to bring in a question from the audience, from Peter Lunn. Peter is interested to know how you avoid muddying the water when you're growing relationships through social media, so it doesn't feel like the customer's being pitched.
If I can, that's one of my favorite questions, and I think, you know, there's got to be a very clear message, first of all, in your profile about what you do and how you deliver. And then the goal, the close on social, is always a phone call. Don't ever try to pitch in an email. Don't ever try to pitch online. The bottom line is your close on social, I could say this 500 times, and it's always a phone call offline. You've got to leave social and become personal, you know, and have those conversations. Every time I set up a conversation, I have a line that says, whether or not we decide to do business together, I'm confident our conversation will be full of insights that can help you grow your business. So my goal is, they know I'm not going to try and sell them. And my entire first call is about learning about them and offering them insights that can help, even if I never talk to them again. And at the end of that call, I will say, I have some ideas that I'd like to run by you that I really think can be phenomenal for your business. Can we set up another call? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, oh, well, you know, you want to talk about them now? And I now have permission to sell. But I don't start and I don't do that until I ask permission to do that. And you can only do that once you've earned the right by offering insights and education. It is a 180 from all the traditional sales training, everything out there that says you don't give away your free consultation. You have to. You need to bring that value today. It is very different than the 70s when the only way they could get the information was going eyeball to eyeball with you, right? That was the way that it was. Now, if you are not providing insights and education, someone else is. And people hire the people that really help them and offer them the kinds of insights that can even help them make the decision on whether or not they need your product or service. So the end of this, muddying the waters, is when you try to sell online. Don't, ever. Like, you know, your call to action. I mean, I have my book as a call to action online, and I sell some of that. But my services, I will never, ever try to sell. I will always turn it into a phone call. And I have a calendar sync. So if you go to scheduleacallwithbiehn.com, anyone in the world can schedule a phone call with me, 15 minutes with anyone. So I make it easy for my prospects to do that too.
Yeah, I would like to add to that that, you know, if you think about the sales function, and I go back to when I was working at AT&T, I was trying to get to know people at my customer who were like VP level, and the IT department was, as we mentioned earlier, they were kind of in opposition to this. And I see this a lot with my clients now. And so the question is, what are you trying to do? And I think I would answer this question that comes from one of the listeners in this way, is that, you know, really you're trying to build relationships. And so if you think about it from that perspective, whether you're creating content or whether you're just commenting on a blog post or whatever else you're doing with this person through social media, you're trying to build a relationship. And I think that as long as you keep that front of mind, it's really a different way of saying what Biehn was saying. You're going to be okay. Especially if you're already a salesperson, because you know what to do and what not to do. You're not going to walk up to your prospect and start like asking them to sign on the dotted line. Generally speaking, especially if you're in a solution type of sale, you know. So I think that, you know, you just use your head, you're going to be okay. This kind of goes towards, like, you know, a lot of the sales teams out there are reading the Challenger sale or have taken training on Challenger selling. It's much the same thing. You're just out there to provide an opinion. Oh, well, look what Biehn's got right on her desk.
It's actually what my computer is on.
Yeah, I saw it shift.
I'm interested to ask you, because you guys are meeting with a lot of companies all the time, talking to a lot of people. And are there companies out there who you would consider to be exemplars, people who are really using social selling to a very competent degree?
Sandra, I'll let you start.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll start with this one. So I have an answer to this. I knew this question in advance somehow. But honestly, I think the answer is really no. I don't think there are any. I mean, I think there are companies that are doing a good job trying to get involved in this space, but I don't think there's any you would hold up. I do think that there are individuals who have completely figured this out. And you can actually find those people online, and you know more or less who they are. If you're checking social media and you're looking inside your industry, you can find people who've figured this out. You can also see people doing a very horrible job, like trying to sell, like Brim was saying not to do on LinkedIn and stuff like that. So to answer the question, though, I mean, I think this is still a wide open space. And I started my company, it's going to be 2 years ago now, in September, and I thought, okay, well, maybe there's going to be a horizon for this, and everyone's going to come around to this, and we'll be there. I think people are definitely spending more money to figure out social media, but I don't think anyone's cracked this code by a long shot.
So I agree. There are very few companies that have totally embraced social selling. I have worked in many departments of companies, and there are a lot of companies like Aramark they're really working toward this. Other companies, Franklin Covey, for example, their sales teams are really working toward using more social selling, and they're companies that we're helping. But I have not seen any real leader. There are some companies like Cognizant, where Jerry Moran, who's probably one of the best social sellers out there, is running their social presence. But I don't know that, and I don't want to speak for it, but I don't know that it's been adapted by the sales reps. And that's the big piece. It's the sales reps that really need to be doing the social selling on a daily basis. And it really is going to come down to KPIs. At the end of all of this, that is the only thing that is going to switch the salesperson's activities, are ultimately what are they being measured on. And until the KPIs switch, no company is really going to start to completely embrace social selling.
Do you think that the social selling philosophy can apply to smaller and medium-sized businesses, or is it the domain of the big corporates?
I think social selling has leveled the playing field for everybody, and LinkedIn in general really has made it equal. You could be a small entrepreneur, or you could be who has complete control over your website and your blogs, but maybe you don't even have a blog, and you can blog inside of LinkedIn, and you have the ability to reach a network. You could be a salesperson in IBM, and it doesn't matter what the IBM website is doing, because you're starting to create a reputation of a thought leader and a subject matter expert right from your LinkedIn site, right? So I think your question is a great one, but I really do believe social selling levels the playing field.
Yeah, I would totally go ahead.
Even in the big organizations like the IBMs of the world, effectively what you're saying is that the salespeople are running their own kind of little businesses.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that the marketing organizations need to start looking at this as running their own multiple businesses. That is, selling their solutions to individual verticals. I was just looking at the comment that you forwarded over from Peter Lund. I think it's a good one. Is this a top-down versus a many-to-many? And really, what social has enabled us to do is have those many-to-many conversations. Now, certainly, if you're a big Fortune company, you have an enormous amount of money and resources at your disposal to write all sorts of content and make it very, very individualized. But I don't think that that's any different than a smaller company that might have less to go after from a vertical perspective, writing that content and being relevant inside the verticals that they're choosing to be involved in. So I think it's sort of individual, and I think it's also marketing facing, that marketing needs to wake up to the fact that there needs to be more specific content created that's going to enable sales to do what they need to do through social.
One of the things I have a lot of my clients doing now, and I happen to work with a lot of banks, and a lot of them, believe it or not, although they tend to seem like they're archaic, are really pulling into the social selling world because, at least in our area, it's so incredibly competitive. They need to get some kind of edge and some kind of advantage. And so leveraging social has been a way that they've been reaching out to try to do this. But there's a lot of compliance around when you're in financial institutions. So if you're a big company and you've got a sales team doing this, one of the things that we're doing, and we've given them a lot of ways to create content, is they now have a path. I write something in Word, I send it to this email in marketing. Within 48 hours, I'm going to get it redlined. I'm going to send it back to them. Within 48 hours, I'll get approval. And so there is a system in place and an expectation, and so content is starting to come from the salespeople, and the marketing people are now turning the content, the usable content that the salespeople create, and putting a marketing spin around that. It has been incredibly effective because what happens is the content is really relevant. So here's what we're doing. If I give you three things, three of a million things that we're doing with maybe 7 that we're doing with the sales reps. Number one, all of their smartphones have a Dragon dictation type program. They talk, it turns into text. They can email it to themselves, or they can email that right to marketing, and they'll create a piece around their idea. Number two, we have them forward, and so if a client or a prospect asks a question and they answer it in an email and that's blog worthy, we have them forward that to their marketing person. The marketing person will now take that and make it a relevant blog. Number three, we have interview questions. So if you're a banker, maybe you reach out to, and do an interview with the top CFO of XYZ company, and this is someone that you really want to build a relationship with and can't get into any other way. Do an interview. So they'll ask 2 or 3 questions. They'll record it. They send the recording to marketing, and they create a blog. And then you get to highlight a CFO that is impressive that you had that conversation with them. You played to their ego. Other CFOs want to hear what they had to say, and you really start to build a following, and that's sort of a win-win-win-win-win. So that's a few ways that these salespeople can start to get content and bridge that to the marketing department and get that help.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I've seen lots, and I'm sure you have as well, salespeople posting blogs or on LinkedIn, particularly at the moment, that are really either just a sales pitch or,
it's a problem.
And I've talked to a very large Fortune company about that exact problem, Greg. And I think that the answer is anywhere and everywhere you're going to get that content. And my hat's off to Bienn's clients who are finding ways to successfully do this through the Salesforce and make it not salesy. That's awesome. Probably the best way to do it. That's kind of what worked for me when I was in a sales role myself. But really, no matter where it comes from, as long as it's got as long as it's created in a way that it's going to help drive sales, whether it comes from marketing or sales, I think it's fine.
I think one of the major pieces we found in content development with salespeople that really has an effect is when there's an implementable takeaway inside of that blog. It's not just a story, it's not just a case study, but it's what can I do now? Now that I read this and you got my attention, what can I do? And so if there's an implementable takeaway, and I always say the litmus test is if they can do it without calling you, it's an implementable takeaway. What can they do without you that brings them value? And if you can always add at least one of those into a blog post, it will be an effective sales tool.
I was wondering what you guys would say about Sales Navigator. Sales Navigator is LinkedIn's subscription specifically for salespeople. There are different levels of that depending on the size of the organization. And do you feel that it's really important and essential part of the social selling initiative to have Sales Navigator as part of the LinkedIn offering?
Sandra, do you want to start with that, or?
Yeah, well, Bryn, why don't you start and I'll tag on.
So, Sales Navigator. You never want to bite the hand that feeds you. So I'll start with that, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity. I have Sales Navigator. I have the premium. I could never not have the premium. So I'll start with that. Having a premium account for many reasons is very beneficial for me, and my world wouldn't work without it. Sales Navigator in and of itself, there's really two pieces. There's a team link piece to Sales Navigator, and then there's the customized news stream with Sales Navigator. The real benefit of Sales Navigator is you can create your own news stream with only the prospects and accounts that you are interested in engaging with. So you can hop into that news stream, and whether you're connected to someone or not, you can engage on a piece of content that they shared. You can comment. You can get on their radar based on what mattered to them because they shared it. So there is definitely some importance in that, and that's actually something that we teach, because you can actually go into anyone's profile, look at their activity, and engage on an individual at that moment. So it's a nice product. It is not a be-all to end-all, and very few of my salespeople actually use that piece well. Even when I train it, they don't see. Salespeople want immediate ROI. They don't like this whole you have to nurture someone. They want a phone call. They're used to that. So Sales Navigator is more about nurturing than really reaching out and getting phone calls. So the team link piece, however, if you are in a very large organization, is incredibly effective. And the reason that it's so effective is what Team Link does is, like if you're connected, all of your first degree connections, unless they've closed down their connections, you have the ability to search and filter who they know. Team Link allows you to search and filter literally everyone in your organization, whether you're connected to them or not. So if you're in Atlanta and you're trying to get into a company in Philadelphia, or you're even trying to get into a company in Atlanta, you can see that a coworker that you've never met or heard of in Chicago knows someone, and you can reach out to that coworker and leverage their network. So that's the team link piece that's really effective in a larger organization, and I think that's a brilliant piece if it's used well.
Brent, I don't know if you saw, but I was just, because I know that LinkedIn rolls out things in weird patterns to different people. You actually mentioned that on a blog post that you put up over the weekend, I think. Mm-hmm. But they rolled out for me last week that this thing where it's basically like Team Link, but you can look at people's profile inside your own company, more or less anonymously. I mean, they put it out there like, hey, find someone who knows how to do X, Y, and Z. But when it boils straight down to it, it's like, you're able to view as many profiles inside your own enormous, if you're working for an enormous organization or company, you're able to look at all those profiles with any footprint of what you're doing or who you're looking at online.
Without hitting the commercial limit?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So
it's called lookup, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. And they just rolled it out for me anyway. Maybe you've had it for longer over there, Craig.
I have the premium, so I don't get all those. I don't have a commercial search limit.
Yeah, well, and so let me just tag on to this in the following way. Like, I think that LinkedIn, what LinkedIn is about at its heart, and I know they're trying to do lots of other things, but what they're about at its heart is networking with other people and knowing other people and being connected to other people. As a matter of fact, I think like what really benefits them the most is when more people are connected to more other people. And yeah. So I think in the end of the day, everything, that's the lens through which they see most things. And what we're doing is just a little bit different than that. So I completely agree with what Brim was saying, that there are these things that these inherent advantages, but I would go just a little farther to say, like, LinkedIn is going to be about LinkedIn, so you need to be a little careful about it. And like, I know, for example, that one of the, like, at a large software company in the northwest of this country, what they're doing as far as their entire social selling approach is to give all their salespeople access to Navigator. And I think that, to Bryn's point, very few people are going to use it effectively. I think there needs to be a lot more to it, and there's no content aspect to it at all. So from my perspective, great, maybe you have a great content engine inside your company and you guys can kill it, but back to Greg's point earlier, or question earlier, what companies are out there doing a great job? They're very few. So I think it's a good tool, but it's definitely not going to handle everything for you.
It's not an answer for a sales.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
So I think time is just about beaten us today, actually. So
Wow.
I'd just like to, yeah. Can I just ask you, Biehn and Sandra, Biehn first, what's the best way for people to contact you?
So connect with me on LinkedIn. Please just send a little note of that you saw me here, because otherwise I'll ask you how you know me. So that would be awesome. Follow me on Twitter. And can I say, if you're interested in learning more about my book, it's linkedinbook.info on amazon.com. So it's linkedinbook.info. Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you, Biehn. And Sandra, the best way to contact you?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. I've got this most unique name. So again, you just type in Sander either on Twitter or on LinkedIn. Connect with me there for sure. And I guess I'd be remiss if I wasn't plugging my book as well, called The Third Year Paycheck, that talks about some of my experiences of trying to innovate inside of a large organization and kind of what happened and what I learned.
Yeah. Terrific. Well, thank you both very much today. It's a really interesting discussion. I'm going to watch this again because there's so much insight packed into this 45 minutes that I couldn't take it all, didn't the first hearing. Terrific. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for watching. And we'll be back again soon with some more insights from the experts.